As academics, we're constantly required to demonstrate how our work is making impact. Well, what better way to show that your work is making impact than through working with an EdTech startup or SME who may reach millions of users. I'm Rose Luckin and I'm a professor at University College London, and I'm director of the Educate programme, which is a research incubator for startups and SMEs in the EdTech sector in the UK. I think the EdTech sector in Europe has grown enormously and quickly, but I think we're still quite a way behind the US and now behind China in terms of the investment that is being put into the EdTech sector. And I think another complexity is the way in which different countries across Europe, and then thinking globally across the world, either embrace or do not embrace technology within the education system. So I think the sector, in terms of the startups and SMEs, has put enormous amount of energy, innovation, entrepreneurship into the work they're doing, and I see amazing things happening. It's really incredible. But we're still kind of coming up against structural barriers and funding barriers that mean that I don't think we're making as much impact as we could be, and we're not making as much impact as I think the sector is making in the US and in China, for example. The European Educational Technology Network is very much looking at higher education and the role of higher education in the fostering of EdTech ecosystems across different countries, continents, and as joined together. And I do think higher education has a very important role to play. Firstly, higher education is about education, so it's important that higher education embraces educational technology and uses it effectively to support teaching and learning. It's actively involved in that. And I think it needs to become far more actively involved in the EdTech sector. I believe as we start looking at the way that much more advanced technologies are being used in education and technology, so yes, things like artificial intelligence, but also intelligent VR, AR, many of the amazing possibilities. I think it's really important that our higher education sector is actively involved in working with startups and SMEs to help them develop more effective educational applications for these cutting-edge technologies. So I see it very much as a partnership, a co-design partnership. But I also think there's a role for higher education in fostering that entrepreneurship, both in terms of university staff who might want to be involved either on their own or perhaps in collaboration with an existing startup and SME in being more entrepreneurial, in turning their understanding of teaching and learning, possibly even something they've developed themselves, into a reality, into a product, into a service. And then I think there's a role for those of us in education who are involved in trying to nurture entrepreneurship in setting up organisations like Educate, programmes like Educate and others across Europe and the globe to try and foster within their local communities the kinds of entrepreneurial EdTech enterprise that will, in the end, make a huge difference to education. I find it quite interesting when it seems so obvious to me that higher education should absolutely be at the forefront of this kind of development and should be embracing programmes like Educate because it gives them such amazing access to cutting-edge thinking, to cutting-edge technologies. It's an opportunity to get involved. Higher education understands research evidence. It's an opportunity to make those connections too. As academics, we're constantly required to demonstrate how our work is making impact. Well, what better way to show that your work is making impact than through working with an EdTech startup or SME who may reach millions of users when you as an academic write a journal article and, being frank, you're lucky if 100 people read it.